right now. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. This is part one of our two-part series for back-to-school planning for safe routes. Today, we're discussing how to refresh the back-to-school commute and introducing some safe and healthy ways for students to get to school and how to support them. You'll be hearing from school transportation experts and safe routes to school experts on how we can reduce the single car commute and get students walking and rolling or busing to school safely. In this webinar, again, we're going to introduce some healthy ways for students to get to school. In addition to hearing from these experts, you're also going to learn how you can really support these programs and modes in your communities. Whether or not you have an established bus system or walking school bus or bike train, you're going to get some input on how you can support these types of modes in your community. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to go through this welcome, and then I have a few polls just to kind of get an idea of who's in the room with us today. Then next, I'll pass it off to ODOT Safe Routes School Manager Heidi Manlove, who will go over a history of safe routes and give you some resources. Then we'll get to the meat of our presentation. We have Dittus, who is the manager of Pupil Transportation at the Oregon Department of Education, and he's going to be talking about school buses and what to expect this fall and how you can support school buses in your community. Then we have Whitney Bennett from Commute Options, who will be talking about walking school buses. And finally, we have Megan Ramey with Bikabout and Hood River, who will talk about bike trains. Then we'll have some time for questions, and to end us off, we'll have some information and general resource sharing. But first, I want to start with some polls. So I'm going to launch this first poll. And for this, I just want to get an idea of who's in the room today. What organization or group are you here representing? School staff, school districts, community-based organizations, nonprofits, PTA, PTO, parent or caregiver, county government, local city jurisdictions, or other. And if you are a part of that other group, go ahead and let us know in the chat which group you are with. And I'll give folks about 30 seconds here to complete this. And for those just joining us, we currently are sharing which organizations or groups we are a part of as we join this presentation. All right. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll there. Looks like we have quite a lot of school district folks, so thank you all very much for joining us. I appreciate you being here. There's going to be a lot for you to learn on how to support these different modes in your areas, so thank you so much for joining us. All right. I'm sharing those results. Stop share. Perfect. All right, and then for our next poll, I want to get an idea of where folks are located. So I'm going to launch that poll here now too. This is very Oregon based. So if you are not from Oregon or joining us from Oregon, go ahead and put in the chat where you are joining us from. And again, give people about a minute or so to join this poll. Oh, awesome. It looks like Francesca is from Southeast Washington. Thank you, Francesca, for joining us. Looks like we have a lot of Portland folks. That, you know, tends to make sense, as that's the largest metro area here. Awesome. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll here too and share these results. So again, we have a lot from the Portland metro area and Willamette Valley, and then a few people from the coast and some people joining us from other areas outside of Oregon. So thank you again for joining us all. This is great to know where we're all coming from and all of that. All right, awesome. Now it's going to be time for me to stop talking, and I'm going to pass it off to Heidi Manlove, who's going to talk to us about Oregon Safe Routes to School.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming today. This is an exciting collaboration that we have with ODE. We partner with different folks around the ODE agency in terms of safe routes to school. We started partnering a few years ago, and we're looking to build more collaborative programming to help bring more safe routes to school resources to folks that work at school districts to help us do our work while you guys do your work. So I think it'll be you'll see more of these types of resource trainings, but also information and events coming forth. Just a little history about Safe Routes to School in Oregon. Safe Routes to School programming has always been around to some extent of trying to keep kids safe when they're going to school, but it's become it was a statewide funded program in 2006 through 2012 largely. And so there's been some infrastructure funding along the way in and out, and then education funding for most of that time frame. And so I'm the education program manager. So I fund things like coordinators working with students and families and school districts to help coordinate safe routes to school education programs. And so what I do in the education side is help train students how to be confident and feel confident going to and from school, walking and rolling, or going to the bus. But also to bringing together communities and adults and parent education on how they can gear their child to be able to walk and roll to school safely. And so that's part of my work, but the other part of the Safe Routes to School program is the construction side, where we fund construction projects near schools. And so my partner, Leanne Ferguson, manages that side of the program. So we're excited to collaborate with ODE on multiple pieces of this. We also fund grants for planning assistance for both the education and the construction project. So we like to look at this as a holistic program where we encourage communities to not just focus on just infrastructure projects or just education work, but collaboratively doing both if possible. So next slide. So some of the work, especially on my side for the education programs, is working with our technical assistance providers. We also call them our TAP team. So Emily, our host, is part of that TAP team, as well as you'll hear from Whitney. Her folks from Commute Options is also part of this, and we work with Alta Planning. And so all three of these partners play a large role, as well as the Street Trust in the Portland metro area. So we have a good group of folks who've been working with bicycle and pedestrian education programming for a long time, and planning and working with planning construction projects. So we work with the technical assistants to program our regional hubs, which the state of Oregon is divided into 3 separate regions right now that we focus on bringing regional expertise and help in those hubs. It's a way to bring together folks that are interested in safe routes to school regionally, so that they can coordinate efforts, help each other, but also just discuss some challenges and barriers of what they need to get through. So we also offer technical assistance and training, just like this webinar is produced through our technical assistance team. But we also produce materials like brochures and other types of education materials. And just new, I'm going to put a new plug in for our new programming, which is expanding our Jumpstart program. So our Jumpstart program is both combined pedestrian and bicycle safety education, where we train trainers. Next slide. So Jumpstart has been around for a while. We've only been able to have one bike fleet previously. And so we would send out information for schools to compete for us to loan them our bike fleet for a year. And with that came training to train the trainers. So like PE teachers or after school programming. And then the school would be able to have the bike fleet for a year and be able to train students on safe behaviors, but also help them feel more comfortable going to and from school. So it's a train the trainer program where we train staff in order to feel comfortable and confident training students. And we do have our curriculum is called the Neighborhood Navigators. We call it curriculum, but school staff would call it like additional educational material, but it is set to state standards. We've worked with ODE on developing that. And this is performed by our TAP team to train the educators. And this helps to build sustainability of safe education behaviors for kids going to and from school, build sustainability within the school in terms of promoting kids walking and rolling to school. And also this helps us because we're not able to go around and train students at every school. So this is our dream come true in terms of trying to provide resources for schools to be able to do this within their capacity. Next slide. And additionally, I said we design resources, and these are resources that you can have whether you have a Safe Routes to School program or not at your school. So we can send you these items from our storeroom throughout the year or for special events, not just for walk and roll events or not just for Safe Routes to School programming. So we make things like this images of our very, very, very famous comic book characters, Strider and Viv. We have some comic books that are created to help educate students, but also encourage them to walk and roll to school. So you can visit our website, OregonSafeRoutes.org, for more of these types of resources. And I think that's it for me. On to Brock.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. And now we're going to hear from Brock Dittus, who is with the Oregon Department of Education, Pupil Transportation Department.
Well, good morning. I'm glad to be here today and glad to speak to you all who are gathered. It's nice to be a part. And I think it's particularly nice in my mind because I've often seen school bus transportation siloed from the rest of the conversation or vice versa. There's a lot of folks that could talk to each other and often don't. And so it's important to me that we make some of those connections and that folks are aware of kind of what the biggest picture of school transportation is, because there's a lot of different moving pieces. This picture is of me when I worked as a school bus driver in Portland, Oregon. As you can see, I'm also a big fan of riding the bike. The one pictured is now defunct. I think I rode it into the ground, but I was a for years, and then I would drive students to and from school when I wasn't riding. And so, long tradition. My grandma was also a school bus driver, and I got a feel for some of the controls when I was 5 or 6. And so it was something I think that was sitting in the back of my mind for a long time, and eventually it became my profession. So grateful for that. We can move to the next slide. So just talking about the current status of school bus operations, I think it's important to recognize that no doubt it's big news probably for a lot of communities that there's a pretty much universal school bus driver shortage at the moment. It is difficult to retain employees and to pull new employees in on a schedule that allows all of a school district's obligations to be easily met. It doesn't mean they're not being met in most cases. It just means that folks who would usually have other responsibilities in administration or are taken away from those responses. And instead of fixing buses, they are now driving buses. So it's important that the work is done, but it's also important that we in some of the places that coordinate. What was that? Oh, it's important that the folks who are coordinating have a chance to do that so that the operations can continue to run. And so I think probably my biggest call for those who are not intimately involved is one, for compassion, to understand that like many other industries, this is right now something that folks are having difficulty with. And I think a little compassion, a little understanding goes a long ways. And one of the reasons I'm excited about being a part of this conversation is that some of the stress and the strain on an understaffed transportation department might be helped by some of the other options that we'll discuss today. And so with that, figuring out what are your needs, in your community, if you have students who ride on the school bus, or if you know folks who do and you're in contact with those folks, figuring out what the big picture looks like. The start of the school year can be a particularly stressful time for a transportation department, trying to get routes put together, trying to figure out who rides, who doesn't. Doing what we can to facilitate communication between families, parents, guardians of the folks riding the school buses and those who might not be can help the transportation operation get a better picture of what's coming in the fall. And so I've got this bullet point here of occasional ridership versus opting out. There are some folks who are well positioned to walk or ride to school. And if that's a choice that works well sustainably, one of the things that often comes to mind to me is the question of whether someone might be able to do this year round, including through the winter, or if there will be seasonal difficulties that make it difficult or harder for folks to make that work. And there's not a right or a wrong there, but it is really helpful information when transportation folks are planning to figure out, do we need to make this stop, or can we consolidate this route, or can we serve other students if we know that this family is pretty good and pretty resourced when it comes to walking and riding. So those are the sorts of things that I encourage folks to make the connections with. Like I said, it can be difficult for a transportation operation to get all the info, and it's not traditionally been well connected with that. But I think a little communication goes a long ways and can help folks, particularly in the planning stages between now and the beginning of the next school year, to figure out how can we meet the needs that we have. There are certain students who will need to ride the bus regardless. Students with special needs sometimes are best served by a school bus, and that's really the only option. Whereas other families, again, might be able to say, hey, we don't need bus service. We can send that to folks who do, and we can walk and ride because we have a good plan for it. So I think that's probably most of what I have on this slide. We can move to the next.
I think the next is
okay, and that's it.
Yes.
Okay, so just to recap, I think the most important thing that we can do for each other is to make sure we build those communications. It can be difficult. Folks are busy. Folks have attention pulled in different directions. But if we can encourage our families and students to be in touch with the school and their transportation departments or their contractors, it helps, and it goes a long ways, I think, towards making things sustainable in a time where folks are maybe under-resourced. So with that, I'll pass it off to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brock. And again, too, for folks, if you have questions as through these presentations, please just put that in the chat, and then we'll go ahead and respond to those in our question and answer session. Next up, we have Whitney Bennett from Commute Options, who's going to talk about the walking school bus.
Thank you, Emily. You can go ahead and click it over to that, my slide. Very nice. Okay, so as Emily said, I'm Whitney Bennett, and I work for Commute Options, and I like to preface this with, we do run a walking school bus program, but I do work for a nonprofit. So sometimes the way these look running from the vantage point of a nonprofit versus within the school district can vary. So it definitely has lots of different opportunities in how it can be implemented. But basically, the walking school bus is a group of students walking to and from school with an adult leader, and typically a trained adult leader, along a planned route. Students can jump on and off the walking school bus if it's along the route, and the planned route in the meeting point can be a spot where it's, say, maybe within a housing complex that has a lot of families. And the other idea about that meeting point is it's an opportunity where families can do a park and walk. So they can also drop their students off if they live not within the walk zone. So these are designed to be another resource for getting students to and from school. So just like Brock was talking about, yes, there is this deficit of school bus drivers. So therefore, we have a few less school buses on the road, and it's really hard to get school buses within the walk zone because ideally that's where students will be walking. But there's a lot of reasons why that doesn't always happen. Could be lack of infrastructure, lack of comfort, or lack of just education of using the infrastructure. So having these walking school buses really tackles a lot of the problems that we're seeing, one of them being the lack of school bus routes, and also sometimes just a lack of infrastructure and education on how to safely walk and roll. So some of the benefits of these walking school buses, there's so many, my list is kind of silly what I wrote out because it just keeps expanding. And right now at the top of it is really this idea of community connection. When I get these walking school buses together, it is fascinating to see students that had no idea that were certain routes that they could take, trails by their houses that they explored, and then they meet their neighbors as well. We have students jump on the walking school bus just so that they can actually get to know the kids that live within the housing complex. So there's lots of benefits in that way of that connection of students get exercise, extra steps, extra walking, going to and from school. Sometimes they turn into having bikes be part of it. It then borders that kind of becoming a bike train, but we try to keep the modes separate because that really helps smooth out the actual route. And other benefits is that, like our model is going to be showing, is that it can really help educate about safe routes to school education. It's been a little bit harder for us to get in the schools to carve out time because of the coming out of the pandemic. And so we are looking at our walking school bus this year as an opportunity to really hone in on this safe routes to school curriculum within each of these walking school buses so that we can make sure that the material is getting to students that are actually really in need and using it. The other benefit of a walking school bus is it really helps assist in a very large issue that's rising in, that is the elevated absenteeism. So a lot of students coming out of the pandemic are out of their pattern of getting to school, and some of those habits aren't instilled yet. So absenteeism, and for a lot of other reasons, absenteeism has been on the rise. So some of the communities we're working with right now have really reached out to us in an effort to focus on certain areas that are having higher rates of absenteeism because the students are having issues trying to get to and from school. So it's a really great solution for that. A couple models of the walking school bus that can be used, because it does depend on the organization that's implementing the walking school bus, whether it's within the school district or coming from a nonprofit or another entity. So there's a formal walking school bus and there could be informal walking school buses. Informal ones are just happening already, where families are already gathering together and walking to school and shifting responsibilities by day. Those are really wonderful ways of having the walking school bus happen. The formal one is more organized by an entity such as us, or within the school district, safe route school coordinators within the district, or champions within the school district organizing these. When we have a formal one, it can be led by volunteers, which, as we know, it's a little bit harder to get volunteers currently, coming out of the pandemic. So it is a lot of work, but still can be done. We've been able to keep a handful of volunteers on board through the pandemic and be able to lead some of these walking school buses. But the best model is really the paid leader model. And this is when you can actually pay stipend to the leaders. And what we have had in the past in our organization is that they've been parents. So similar, it's challenging with people's schedules. It's challenging to staff positions, part-time or full-time. But we found the greatest success with actually having adults and caregivers that were already walking to school, having them join on as part-time staff that we would hire from our point and be able to pay them a certain amount to work 10 hours a week, 20 hours, depending on their commitment. And that was the most successful models we've had going. And again, as I highlighted, it depends on where you're coming from and how you're running it, how that can really be implemented. So my third bullet point there is plans for this fall, and what we're looking at making our walking school bus be, like I mentioned, really this integration of safe routes to school curriculum with end of year or end of 2-year cycle of creating a deliverable that gives the steps, a guide to creating a model just like this. So walking school bus, education in action, the activities that we use for safe routes to education within these walking groups, and with the hope that it can be replicated. And then the last bullet there is outreach. So like Brock was highlighting, it comes down to communication. We need, in order for these to work, we need the schools, the school districts to completely be on board. And the most successful ones happen when our school administrators are right there with us and helping to put the word out right in the beginning of the school year. So right now, for me, very, very busy already trying to prep these programs to get leaders on board and get the word out and get students registered. At the same time, there's that you would register to ride the bus. And if it can start in the fall, then their habit is set, and then they'll continue using it. And so it's a lot about timing, a ton about communication. And there's lots of opportunities to do that outreach depending on your community and what your schools have going on. Our Parks and Rec District, we're located in Bend, Oregon, but our Parks and Rec District is doing a lot of outreach events at some of our low-income housing complexes. And so I'm just piggybacking on top of that and jumping in and tabling and just getting students to register in August before school starts. So that's all about timing and having that good relationship with the different entities in the area that might be pulling together possible participants in the area. So with that, I'm gonna end it because I think more than anything, it's just those, there's another slide. I can talk about that. This is just an example of our walking school bus in the wintertime, and the flyers and information sent out, just trying to provide a lot of information. Everything is in English and Spanish. The route maps we try to create simple route maps, but really having to provide a lot of info out there with the material so that we can make sure we're clearly communicating what the walking school bus is and how it operates when people take that one single glance at any of the marketing material we put out. So I think that's it. Is that the last one, Emily?
Yes, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Yeah, awesome. Great. And next we're going to go to Megan Ramey, who's going to talk about bike trains. And I want to preface this too, that I pared down this presentation. So with Megan's permission, I will send out her full presentation because there's so much great information in there, if that's okay with you, Megan. And I know that she was having some computer issues earlier, so let's see if we've got her. Just a moment, I'm gonna see if she's.
Are you there?
Yes, there you are. Awesome.
Okay.
Hello.
I had a hard time muting myself.
Oh, no worries.
Hi, everyone. So nice to be here. I want to give a special shout out to Brock, who's a friend, and it's so amazing to be on a webinar with him. He took me and my family on a bike ride a few years back of this great Forest Park loop on the Leif Erikson Trail, and we just did it again a couple of days ago, and I have nothing but love for that guy, and very much cherish what he was talking about with coordination between different ways to get kids to school. So I am coming to you from Portland, actually. Normally I would be coming to you from Hood River. I am in Portland until the 31st of July. We are cat sitting and getting to live a nice little workcation here. My daughter, my 12-year-old daughter, is actually at OMSI doing a Lego Architecture in Cities camp, which I would love to go to. So we're in Portland. If anybody wants to get together for coffee or go on a Pedalpalooza ride, I would love to accept that invitation. So one of my hats that I wear is the active transportation representative for ODOT Region 1, which is the 4 counties of Metro Portland, including Hood River, which we call ourselves the redheaded stepchild of Metro Portland. And I'm also a board member for CAT, which is the Columbia Area Transit Agency. I am the founder of Bikabout, which is two-wheel travel website inspiring some great wandering of cities, towns, and trails in North America. And lastly, I am a bike train conductor, a title which will probably change in the next 2 weeks. I can't be public about it yet. And so yeah, I want to give a little bit of backstory before I ask Emily to play this video that you see. So I started in this role as just a very passionate transportation advocate, and I moved to Hood River in 2016, not really knowing where my place was. I became an advocate in Boston, which is a very different animal than Hood River. So I didn't really know where my place was. I remember connecting with the principal and many times, like, what can we do to get more kids walking and biking? And he's, principals are busy people, and they have other things to focus on than a mom who's just prodding them all the time. But so it was October of 2020, in the middle of COVID and distance learning. He approached me and said, the teachers are super hungry, want to see the kids need to see each other, they need to get outside, they need to be active. Can you organize a bike parade that happens after school to go just like fly by the school? We won't stop, there will be no communications or touching, we'll just like keep going. So this is the bike parade that I organized, and I'll let Emily play it. So yeah, we had 102 kids and parents, and there were 2 different trains from 2 different neighborhoods, and we joined and met somewhere in the middle and did a roundabout around the school so the kids could see the teachers. There were teachers crying, the principal was tearing up, I was tearing up. It was a pretty magical moment. And this gave birth to the bike train, which we can now go back to the slides and I can explain how that got started. So that was in October 2020. Fast forward to March of 2021, when in-person school resumed. The principal approached me again and knew that there was going to be congestion outside the school because of parents being a little freaked out about COVID, so they're driving their kids to school. So he said, we have to do something to mitigate this. Let's do your bike train idea. So I was like, yes, okay, yay. So I'm a map maker. And so the first thing I did was design a map of the 2 neighborhoods that needed had the biggest sort of Frogger intersections to cross, that would benefit the most from having to be able to ride with a bike train. So I drew up a map. The school and the PTO promoted that map and the bike train. And then I recruited some volunteers, and just from parents that I know that also had, that were passionate about this. And we got going, and it was pretty amazing from the very beginning. there were, so these are my keys to success. Volunteer mindset is big. It's really interesting to see other volunteers, like the other bike train conductors, and how they react, because some kids have never biked outside their driveway. And if they have, their bikes were put on a vehicle to go to a trailhead, or they've gone to Post Canyon, our mountain biking park, which is a totally different mindset than biking in the street. So it was like a lot of parents were like, oh my God, they're going to kill themselves. But you just have to, I had to kind of say, listen, they're all learning just like we are. We just have to give them some slack, learn their names, which is my second point, because that's the one way you get their attention, and also reward them. It's not all about finger wagging them. You just want to reward them when they're doing something great. I let them volunteer as shepherds, some of the kids that have been on the train for a while, and so they get to lead the train or tail it and make sure they take care of everybody. I learned to be like Ted Lasso. You have a very wide range of perspectives and opinions, and just making sure you hear everybody, but just know you're doing the best that you can, and to stay positive. I stuck to a schedule, so it ran every single day. Didn't matter if it was snowing, if it was raining, if it was cold, if it was hot. We did the train, and there was always a kid on the train. There were times where we got a lot of snow. I think this was last winter, and I had to shut it down for a week because none of the sidewalks were cleared in Hood River, and we would depend on those for our route. We roll when little things happen. There was a little girl, she's one of my favorites. She had a vasovagal, which is kind of like fainting, situation on the ride, and we were lucky because there was another parent who took the kids to school, and my husband stayed with her and called the hospital. The principal is your biggest champion, and I tell Principal Kelly all the time, I owe him so much. He's like essentially started this movement in Hood River. Next slide. So some of the things that Whitney touched on are totally the benefits of bike train, is the fostering of it. It takes a village. It's just this, we call it, Sam Balto is great. He has all these metaphors for bike train or bike bus. It's truly a Trojan horse of advocacy. Our mayor joined us for a ride. We went through the Safe Routes to School planning identification process sponsored by ODOT. I was able to get $20,000 from an ODOT pedestrian safety grant to operate safety rodeos. And in those safety rodeos, I got free bikes to the kids who need them in both like rural Odell and Hood River. And lastly, we won the ODOT Safe Routes to School education grant, which now will fund a full-time person for the next 2 years to work with all 8 schools in Hood River. So the bike train really did spawn all of that action, and it's just amazing to see the cultural shifts happening. So for the work plan for, I guess, Safe Routes to School going forward, there's 5 buckets that I'm helping work on. So we'll get to the bike train and walking bus in a second. Education, the safety rodeos, e-bike learning for teenagers is going to be huge in Hood River. Then number 3, I'm really working on brand and communications, thanks to a lot of nudging from Sam Balto. I think that's so important. Number 4 is infrastructure, which I'm probably the most passionate about, and specifically demonstration projects to get something in the ground next year, not in 10 years when we, stumble upon $5 million to put in a cycle track. I want to get stuff in the ground now. And then most importantly, a focus on equity. I am passionate about this because I'm trying to free up parents' time, and give them their time and money back. And there's that means so much to many single parents in Hood River. So next slide. So the future of the bike train and walking bus, which I started a walking bus last year too. And that was pretty self-organized, not as big as the bike train, but I still think it's so important. And actually, the bike train spawned a bunch of walking buses of kids who felt like walking that day. So they would touch base with their friends and walk to school together, that's all I've ever wanted this program to do, is to foster those type of relationships. So we are transitioning from me operating the bike train to one school to Safe Routes to School manager, inspiring and coordinating for 5 schools. So this is going to be a very much, I'm trying to find essentially who the Megans are at all these 5 schools to be champions of a bike train and walking bus. And I have to figure out, I really want to fund an incentive or a reward for these volunteer conductors. I think that's so important because they're taking time out of their day. How school districts can help, just like what I said, is I am looking, they can find the me's at these schools. They just have to put the word out that they're looking for them, because I guarantee you there's a mom advocate like me at all these schools. Lastly, just a resource that I want to plug is John Zimmerman with Active Towns he did a interview with me, which is one video cast, and then he did an interview with Sam Balto. And I just watched the Sam Balto one 2 weeks ago when it was released. And I'm so inspired by this movement and what Sam is doing and what all the bike train and walking bus groups are doing around the world. There is so much that we can learn from each other, because it's a major cultural shift that we're experiencing right now. I want to plug those two. And then lastly, I will be taking the League Certified Instructor Seminar next month in Lake Oswego, and I would love if you took it with me. So that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Megan, for that. And thank you for plugging the certification as well, too. That we'll send out some information about that in the follow-up email. And again, too, this is a pared down version of Megan's presentation. So happy to send that out as well, too, to the group. Now we have time for questions. I didn't see any come through in the chat. So if you have a question for any of our speakers, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away. And if there aren't any immediately, I have a question for the 3 of you. I'm seeing the main theme of this is that partnership and communication is key. So when you're starting these programs, when you're promoting the school bus, what types of communication channels are the most important to you in terms of getting the word out there, having schools or school districts communicate with you? What are some effective ways of communication that you've seen in the past be really helpful?
I can start briefly and then let everyone chime in. For us, I mean, for me, the most effective way is it's about timing more than anything, and actually getting that response back. And so we always coordinate meetings in August with the administrators to find out what their priorities are. And even before that, we coordinate meetings with the transportation department, which is happening already in mid-July, because they're working. They come back to work much sooner. So now they're in-person meetings, which is just so incredibly exciting. Prior to that was a lot of video meetings that just happened during the summer. And like I said, what's talked about is what are the priorities, what are the routes, where are we losing the plan for our meetings this next week with the transportation department is, where are we not going to have bus routes and we really need, where are the highest needs? And if I can fill that highest need with a walking school bus option, then I'm going to get a lot more of, they're going to help push that out a lot more, because it's going to support some of the issues that they're going to be fielding through those questions that come up. So just those in-person or phone meetings obviously can still be done, and persistence and making sure that the timing aligns with when they're available and when we're going to have the greatest impact, and when they're making the plan for transportation in terms of which the school buses and what the needs are going to be.
I'll add to that in that broadly is seizing fun events and days when they happen. It's funny, I always used to National Walk and Bike to School Day and National Bike to School Day and National Bike Month. I was just like, every day is Walk and Bike to School Day, but that's not the case for most people, and they need like a special invitation. Earth Day was big for us last year. I would say seize those days. And then very specifically with communications, as much as I hate to kill trees, is the paper brochures in the backpacks are a big deal. We printed the maps, the route maps and the timetable on these. And so it's like something that can go on a refrigerator for the whole year. And I guess the most subversive form of communication that I love is the kids plugging it. They will do your job for you if they're excited about it. So just get them excited and they'll invite a bunch of people.
And I'll just jump on and say, I think finding your Megan is a good idea. The community advocate because Megan is a great example of someone who is very interested, very passionate about it, but also a participating parent and someone who has children in the system. And so it's important, I think, to find the parents that can help you, at least from the transportation side. Generally, your local transportation school bus office is going to have their hands full. And anything you can do to connect with the parents that can help carry the torch for that. I'd love to see a day when this is something that is easier to do and there's more structural support for it. But right now, it really does depend on some of that cheerleading and some of the advocacy from parental side. So figuring out who the people are that can help you spread that message is really helpful.
Thank you all. We have two great questions in the chat. I'll start with Francesca's. What is the difference between starting a bike train for an elementary school versus a middle or even high school? One issue is elementary school students all start and end at the same time, but middle and high school have 0 hour in sports. Megan, I think that might be a question for you. Yeah.
So elementary school, yes, is easier, even though there are after school activities. The middle school, well, it's interesting because I would love to do one for the middle school purely from a perspective of from the bully sort of barrier, because there are a lot of kids that don't walk and bike to school, or their parents don't let them walk and bike to school because there are bullies or stranger danger or any of that. So I would love to do the middle school, but maybe I should just ignore my daughter because she's like, Mom, don't do it for the middle school because it'll be so uncool. And I disagree with her. I got to figure that one out to see whether there's actually need, but I know that it is an issue in parents' mind for the middle school. So I gotta crack that nut.
Francesca says we can brainstorm in Lake Oswego. So.
Yay! I'm so excited, Francesca.
Then we have a question from Xiao for Brock. How would you recommend Safe Routes to School partnership with school districts, transportation managers, and operators, sharing resources and benefits of the schools versus single vehicles? Curious if you have any recommendations on how to best support school bus staff without burdening them. Great question.
It's a really good question, which is usually what we say when we're not quite sure what the answer is. I think every operation is slightly different. And so the first step is probably, that conversation with the folks at the school bus depot in your community. I do think that the difference between someone who wants to walk and bike occasionally and the person who can really rely on that. I don't necessarily like the term hardened infrastructure or hardened patterns because it shouldn't be hard, it should be easy. But I do like the idea that if someone has found that, hey, this is sustainable, this is a lifestyle, this is a family pattern that we have, we bike places together. It's not always the case for everyone. It's not possible for everyone, but for those who it is, I think it's a big difference because if someone has to ride the bus one day, but not the other day, that doesn't really help with the capacity issue. But I do see this as a way that you can really reach out. If you're someone who is able to support your own local school district in their transportation needs by a commitment to a walk or bike pattern, sometimes that can reduce the capacity. And again, that can spread resources that are thin to a place that's more helpful. So that's what I see as maybe the most important thing, but it's a complex topic, so I'm sure we could dialogue more. Feel free to reach out.
Yeah, thank you. And then I will be sharing emails with folks, with everyone at the end of this presentation too, if you want to follow up for more information. Got a question for Whitney from Patty. What is the best way to identify parents and kids that might be interested in the walking school bus? How did you identify and locate informal walking school buses?
Yeah, I saw that. So the best way to really identify is it's more, I mean, for us with the walking school bus, it's where the need is more than just the interest in order to have the greatest impact. And so the way that we find that out is to work straight with the school administrators and the transportation department and find out where's the highest absenteeism coming from, where are we losing routes, and therefore that tends to come in those August meetings to define where that need is, or through ongoing communications throughout the year. And then from there, the other source of information for that is we have Family Action Network fan advocates that work a lot with some of the communities that are of higher need, and they tend to be able to connect us with some of these areas where most of the students are coming from that would benefit the most from having some support in getting to and from school within the walk zone. And then identifying and locating informal walking school buses is really just me being out there and going around and in the schools and biking all around the schools and actually seeing these happen. So we do walking audits, and the best time for a walking audit is in the morning and in the afternoon when the students are leaving school or coming to school, and you can actually see those happening. So that's the best way, is just to get out there and to see it. And it sometimes takes a while because there's a lot of schools. We work with quite a few schools as well, so I know it's not just like figuring it out over the summer, but it takes a year or so of being present. So and then is that one, what does registration entail and how is liability dealt with? I could probably tap onto that one from Nicole.
Thank you.
Well, so we have a online registration form, but we also require full signatures. So we have them. We have a Google form where families can register. We also carry the sheets with us. So quite often we'll be running the walking school bus, and someone will come up and be like, "Oh, what is this?" And or a student comes running up and says, "I want to walk with my friend," and then we say, "Okay, we'll take these papers home, bring them, and then you can join." Honestly, we're not super tight. They can walk with us once or twice and not have all their paperwork done. Most of the time they get all the paperwork in. So we will have that all but permission slips available. And then I just have contact information that goes out through the channels of communication, and families contact me and I make sure I can get all of the paperwork to them so they can sign it. It's in English and Spanish. And that's how we get them registered. And then for liability, our insurance that we have through our nonprofit is what covers everything. And that is one reason why I say there's different scenarios. So the school appreciates that because it's then not on their shoulders of what's going on, and so we have our own insurance, and our waivers have been viewed by overseen by our lawyers to make sure that we're fully covered, and that tends to help us facilitate the process, because then the school district doesn't have to figure out how they're going to be liable for these type of off-campus activities. I'm happy to share all of the registration forms and what those all look like. Just reach out to me via email, and I'm always sending those out so people can kind of copy them or have at least a template.
Thank you. Megan, did you want to comment at all on liability and registration at all?
Yeah, sure. So this came up in the very beginning and I asked the principal about this, and he's like, it's a parent volunteer-led initiative. There's no liability on in terms of the school. So let's just make it work. And so we're really like, it's actually wonderful to have kind of like a borderline libertarian sort of perspective with this stuff. I tend to not worry about liability, even though I know it's a big concern for others. In the future, it's going to be something we have to figure out. As long as it stays, this is why it's so important for me to find the parents that want to do this in the other schools, because it's going to be interesting whether when I join some of these bike trains in the future, whether it can come back to me or the school district. That's something for us to figure out. In terms of, we have new kids hopping on and off the bike train and the walking bus all the time. There's no registration process. In the minimum, I ask the kids for their parents' cell phone just so I can have some sort of contact in case something happens. That's and then through the school, they say whether they take the bus or they walk or bike. And even when they take the bus, they go back and forth between taking the bus and walking or biking to school all the time, depending on their mood or the weather or whatever. So it's a very informal, flexible program.
Excellent. With that, unfortunately, we do have to start wrapping up here. We're getting towards noon, and I want to respect everyone's time. So if you still have a question, please put it in the chat, and then I can send those to our speakers, as well as give you their contact information. Just as a general reminder, we have our Safe Routes to School hubs, which you can join, learn more about your local coordinators, learn more about the efforts going on there. Here are the emails for the hub leaders. We have Lindsay in the Portland metro area, Nora Stolting in the Willamette Valley and Coast, and then myself in the rest of Oregon, essentially. And you can find more details on our website too about those. Here are some resources. This is a lot. I will be sending them out individually after this webinar, along with the recording for you to share out. Again, too, we have our Jumpstart Train the Trainer program. We have a great one-pager with some different commute options for students to get to and from school, and all the information that Heidi was speaking to about resources and things on our website. And then we have the Pupil Transportation website as well, too, with the Oregon Department of Education. So thank you. Finally, big plug, please fill out our survey so that we can get some feedback on how to continue to improve these webinars, plan topics, and find more great speakers. I'll be sending that out in an email as well. So thank you very much for filling that out in advance. And with that, I'll close. Here are Brock, Whitney, and Megan's contact information. Again, I'll be sending this out as well. Please send me any other questions you have, and we'll wrap up and get you all in contact with each other. All right, thank you so much for joining us.